Family pathology rolls from generation to generation, like a fire in the woods, taking down everything in its path, until one person in one generation has the courage to turn and face the flame.
Welcome to Point of Relation with Thomas Hübl, a podcast that illuminates the path to collective healing at the intersection of science and mysticism. This is the Point of Relation.
The following interview was recorded during a previous collective healing conference, a free online gathering convened annually by Thomas Hübl to explore insights and share practices for worldwide healing and change. Terry Real has been a practicing family therapist for more than 30 years, and his work has been featured on many major news outlets and TV shows, and in numerous academic publications. His most recent book, Us, Getting Past You and Me to Build a More Loving Relationship, is a New York Times bestseller. Terry founded the Relational Life Institute, which is dedicated to teaching the general public how to live relational lives and to teaching mental health professionals the practice of relational life therapy.
A warm welcome again to the Collective Trauma Summit. My name is Thomas Hübl, and I'm the convener of the summit. And I have the great pleasure and like a warm heart for my dear friend, Terry Real. So welcome, Terry, to our summit again.
We've got to stop meeting like this, Thomas. It's like...
Yeah, that's right. We are meeting all the time in live or recorded interviews. That's so beautiful. And I really appreciate our growing friendship over the years and the deep resonance. We did now some courses together over the years, and it was really a pleasure for me. So I love our depth and our fun and our growing friendship. So thank you for that, Terry. It's really beautiful.
It's a blessing. And I want to acknowledge my spiritual work with you and the healing work that you've done with me, Thomas. It's really been a life changer. So we're colleagues, we're friends. In some ways, I feel like a student. It's a really multifaceted relationship. I'm glad.
Yeah, I'm glad we're having it. Right. So, Terry, speaking of relationships, so you have been working on intimate relationship, couple relationships with families or family systems. And I want to ask you first about your personal development. So when you look at, since you're doing this for a very long time and you got a lot of experience and a lot of depth in your work, and I think when we develop a path, we are also from time to time meeting our creative edge. So how do we update our work? And maybe you can speak a little bit to your own updating. What helps you, or how do you experience the updating? And sometimes also how we let go of certain parts in order to make a step into a new version of ourselves that is more timely, that is more sharp, that is more accurate for this level of our evolution. Maybe you can speak a bit to that, because since you do it for such a long time, I mean, you must have met that multiple times on your path.
Yeah, there've been many versions. The edge for me, and what I feel most alive and juiced about, to be honest, as much as I love sitting with a particular person or couple, I'm more alive teaching. My favorite way of working these days is what we call the couples experiential. Everybody's invited. I just did one, 2 days, 5 couples, and about 300 observers tucked away in the background. And I work for 60, 90 minutes with couple number 1, try and get to the heart of what's stuck and what their next step in transformation and development might look like. And then the other 4 couples give them feedback, very deep, moving. As the work progresses, the group gets deeper and richer. And then I break at lunch and at the end of the day, and I debrief with the therapist observers about what they just saw. And it's very sort of live wire, live ammo. These are real couples, and many of them are on the brink of divorce that no one has been able to help. That's my beat, is couples on the brink that nobody's been able to help. I'm a turnaround guy. So I love the complexity of doing live work and teaching this method all at the same time. That's what juices me up and keeps me alive. I will say this, it's interesting. One person said, and many people echoed, that I seem different this time, but they've seen me do many of these couples experientials over the years, and that I seem softer, less sort of in your face, confrontational, and able to do the same, able to change people and move people in the same way, but with less sort of muscle and more finesse. And here's what I said. At 72, and having just been through 2 cancers, I'm a different person than I was 10 years ago. And I'm a better therapist than I was 10 years ago. This is one of my favorite stories about doing therapy. Not to lord it over anybody, but still. So the story is, there's the great Taoist master, and there's some young kid. There's always some young kid who wants to be enlightened, and he goes to the master, climbs over mountains and fights tigers, and and the master happens to be the king's chef. He's a renowned cook. And the young guy says, teach me about the Tao. And the master says, oh, okay, grab a knife, grab a fork, and cook with me. And as these stories go, a year goes by. I love how that works. And the kid is finally getting fed up right after a year. And he throws down his stuff and he says to the master, I've been with you for a year. You haven't taught me a thing about the Tao. I climbed mountains and faced tigers, and when am I going to start learning? And the master looks at him and goes, stupid boy. He says, let me ask you a question. He says, how many times do you sharpen your knife? And the young man says, a couple, 3 times a day. He says, yeah. He says, how many times have you seen me sharpen my knife? And the boy goes, I've never seen you sharpen your knife. And the master goes, that's right. Because your knife cuts things. My knife finds the space between them.
Beautiful, lovely.
Yeah.
Lovely.
10 years ago, I was cutting things, and now I'm better at finding the space between them.
That's beautiful.
I once said, somebody asked me, can you summarize relational life therapy, the method I've created, in an elevator? And I said, yes, I can summarize the whole method in 2 sentences. You want to hear it?
Mm-hmm.
Here it is. You don't want to do that, do you? You want to do this. That's it. That's my summary.
It's so lovely. This is lovely to hear also how your own awareness of your own change process, and how your whole being was changing over this time. It's beautiful. Like also your own reflectedness of it and the humility that you bring into it. It's beautiful. It's lovely.
We have this opportunity to keep working on ourselves and melting what's frozen and connecting what's disconnected. The recent health challenges that I find myself in have been a tremendous impetus to melt more deeply.
Mm-hmm.
And it's affected how I work.
Yeah. I can also feel that. That's right. It's beautiful. And let's say So, in your massive experience over the years, I mean, you come across like how trauma plays an effect in couple relationships, in family systems, also in intergenerational or transgenerational systems. So, do you want to share with us a little bit, like what are the effects that you see every day in your work, also in your teaching, in your groups or your experiences? That like how does it show up, and how do you work on integrating the trauma?
It's a fascinating thing. I talk about the mysticism of marriage. We all marry our unfinished business. We all marry our mothers and fathers. We all become our mothers and fathers. Falling in love is the conviction, if you're too sophisticated to say it or not, but that this person is going to heal me. This person is going to complete me. And being in marriage or a long-term relationship comes with the realization that not only is this person not going to give it to me, what I didn't get as a kid, but they're exquisitely designed to throw me right back into the wound. They're going to re-traumatize me in precisely the ways I thought they would deliver me from. That doesn't mean you're in a bad relationship. That's what intimacy is. There are plenty of people who would not have done that, but they don't blip on your screen. We pick people who are going to tango with us. And I think the reason why we do is because we want to heal. And what happens is that we have this my heart goes out. We have this very human impulse to just get it from the son of a gun, just give it to me, God damn it. It's what you promised me when we were courting, where'd you go? And therein is the road to hell. The transformation comes when we let go, as is so true in so many of these spiritual moments. We let go of getting it out of them. We tend to ourselves, and I'll talk more about what that looks like. And then we do something different. We don't demand that they do something different in the old drama. We do something different in the old drama. We're not that little boy, and they're not our towering mother or father. And then when we do something different, then they may do something different. And the drama changes, and that heals us. That's how it works. So it's one of these paradoxes. When we let go of that ego and control, tend to our own wounds enough to show up in the relationship in a non-triggered, grown-up way, then the old wound can heal as we tend to each other in more grown-up ways. It's beautiful. The alternative is that we get triggered. We go into our knee-jerk response. I'm going to go into more detail on that. And we just replay the same old unto death or divorce. There's a psychiatrist in Boston who described a client's life as 30 years of repetition, misnamed experience. So the choice is ours. And that's what my work and my book is all about. The work of relationships is not day by day, it's moment to moment. In this moment, right now, am I going to go with my knee-jerk triggered response, which I'll describe in more detail, or am I going to take a breath, get centered, and access a more mature part of me and do something different? And if I do something different, can I change the dynamic between us? That's the opportunity of being intimate with another human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Also, how you described how to disentangle and change, and then when we grow, the relationship can grow, but we can't make the relationship like an it that grows. Right? That's beautiful, very powerful. In your book, like It's called Us, Getting Past You and Me to Build a More Loving Relationship. So getting past you and me. So maybe you can speak a little bit about that sentence. Like what happens if we get past me and you? And how do we do that? And what's the space that we enter then?
It's all about trauma. Our mutual friend Gabor Mate has a saying I quote a lot. You rarely see the wound, you see the scar. And in relationships, you rarely see what I call the wounded child part of the person, very young, the part that just experienced the trauma. You work with that. But in relationships, what you often see is what I call the adaptive child part of the person, what you learned, how you coped with the wound, the characteristic thing that you did over and over again. Fight, flight, or fix. I would ask people watching this to take a moment. And when you're in that automatic knee-jerk response, are you a fighter, a fleer, or a fixer? It's usually one of these three. I'm a fighter. Thomas, what are you?
Maybe a fixer in this regard.
Oh, good. Okay. So you adapt as a young child. I don't know whether this is one of those moments, Tom. I don't know whether I said this or I stole it from you, but here's the language. I teach my students to always be respectful of the exquisite intelligence of the adaptive child. I don't know which of us that came out of, but it was in our teaching together. Mm-hmm. You did exactly what you needed to do back then to preserve yourself. But I have a saying, adaptive then, maladaptive now. You're not that little boy. Your partner is not that towering figure of your parent. And it's time to do something different. So what happens is that we get wounded by our partners. Our wounded child gets triggered. Most of us have about 2 seconds worth of tolerance for that. Then the adaptive part of us comes in and takes over and repeats the same old that we do. The trick is to shift into the prefrontal cortex, which has gone offline in those triggered moments, what I call the wise adult part of us, that's here and now, that can be thoughtful and reflective and make deliberate choices. I will quote you. I know this quote. I love it. To observe is to have choice. But that's because the observing part of you is literally a more mature part of the brain that can remember that we're an us, that this isn't about, when we move into that adaptive child, it's you versus me, a power struggle. One of us wins, one of us loses, a zero-sum game. It's only the prefrontal cortex that gets shut down in those triggered moments that remembers the relationship. Literally, we don't have it in our neurology to remember the context, the whole. That shuts down, and it's all about me, and survival. And what I teach my couples and what I go into in the book is the first skill, the skill from which all other skills come, is what I call relational mindfulness. Take a breath or 10, take a break. I'm a big fan of breaks. Take a walk around the block. Set up with your partner in advance what a break looks like. They know what's going on. Get back into the part of you that wants to make things better. And only then go back into the fray and talk to your partner. The bitter pill here is when you're in that adaptive child part, that part doesn't want to be intimate. That part's about self-protection. And when you're coming at your partner from that part, you will never resolve anything. And so the first skill is recognizing that. And I think both you and I have different ways of doing this, but we both agree you can cultivate shifting out of that reactive state into a more mature centered state. You can build that muscle with practice over time. And that's the way out of this mess. I've been telling the same story to all my little, but may I tell you a story that illustrates this moment?
Oh, yeah. I love stories. Yeah.
Okay. It's a true story. So, I deal with couples on the brink of divorce. The guy was a chronic pathological liar. He lied about everything. And he was the kind of guy, I say to him, the sky is blue. And he says, well, it's aquamarine. He's not going to give it to me. He won't give me blue. So I figure out very quickly what we call his relational stance, the adaptive child thing he does over and over again, which is the guy has a black belt in evasion. He's a liar. He's an evader. So I think relationally, the minute I get what the adaptation looks like, my next question is, who were you adapting to? So I ask a question that, if you're not thinking relationally, seems brilliant, but it's really pretty straightforward. I said, who tried to control you growing up? Right? Show me the thumbprint. I'll tell you about the thumb. If you have a black belt in evasion, who were you evading? He says, my father. Sure enough, military man, how he sat, how he ate, how he drank, the whole thing. I said, what did you do with this controlling father? And he looks at me and smiles. I love the smile. That's resistance. He looks at me and smiles and he says, I lied. So all this comes out, absolutely true story. That weekend, she sent him to the grocery store to get 12 things. True to form, he comes back with 11. She says, where's the pumpernickel? And he says, every muscle and nerve in my body was screaming to say they were out of it. And in this moment, I thought of you, Terry. I took a breath. I found my courage. I looked at my wife and I said, I forgot the pumpernickel. And she burst into tears. And she said, I've been waiting for this moment for 25 years. That's a true story. That's healing. That's how we heal, by shifting who we are in the interaction with the relationship.
That's very touching, very beautiful. Yeah.
And then to get to the larger context, that moment isn't just about healing us or our marriages and relationships. It's about healing the legacy. This is intergenerational. Who knows what that father was reacting to, and his father and his. You've heard this quote many times. It's my most often quoted piece from my first book. I don't want to talk about it, if I may. Family pathology rolls from generation to generation, like a fire in the woods, taking down everything in its path, until one person in one generation has the courage to turn and face the flames. That person brings peace to his ancestors and spares the children that follow. There's a great couples therapist, Heidi Schleffer, and when she sits with a couple, she asks them to bring pictures of their children. And she takes chairs and she circles the couple with chairs. And one by one, she puts the pictures of the kids on the chairs. And she says to the couple, just remember, they're watching.
That is so powerful.
The best gift we can give to the next generation is our own recovery.
We're exposed to such a fast data flow, to so many changes in the world, and to our ecosystems being challenged. And that requires that we have some tools. And there are many tools that are very helpful to stay more regulated, to regulate our stress, to be able to deal with our emotions, to digest our lives, to stay healthy through the nutrition that we take in, both physically, emotionally, intellectually, to be able to be in contact through healthy relationships with our ecosystem in a way that is recharging, that is mutual, that is respectful and ethically sound. We are all interdependently connected to our environment, and so our relationships, from our intimate relationships to our work relationships to the culture to the world, those are all very, very important. And equally important is other systems that we are part of, or the systems that we come from, our ancestral system, our food systems. And an incredibly important factor is to feel that I am grounded in my purpose, I am grounded in my agency, I feel I have something to contribute to this world. That empowerment, when I feel my agency, that's a very strong resource. We will have amazing guest speakers like Dr. Omar Naidu, Terry Real, and Dia Afo. And we will have an amazing workbook companion, many practices, guided meditations. If this sounds interesting to you, and if you're interested to look deeper at different aspects of your whole being wellness, then please join us for this course. It's a 5-module immersion, and with a lot of ongoing practices beyond the course. So if that sounds great, so please join us, and we are very happy to have you.
Visit the link in this episode show notes to learn more and sign up for the course. I hope to see you there. That movement that you very poetically described, like the movement to turn around and face the flames. Can you tell me a little bit about, in your experience and your work, two things: what makes one person in the family system turn around? Like what is it in us that has the power to do that? And the second thing is, how do we, the transgenerational trauma transmission, how can we approach that so that there are patterns that are kind of echoing through the generations? How can, when somebody already recognizes that and has enough strength to face it, to face the flames, what works when we look at transgenerational trauma that actually brings peace to the ancestry? Like how does that process look like in your work?
And we may have some differences on this one. We may work a little differently. To me, the beauty here is you don't have to go after it; it finds you. That transgenerational legacy is in your raised hand as you're about to hit your child the way you were hit, or your withdrawal. It shows up through trauma. I learned that from one of my great mentors, Pia Melody. As a family therapist, I'd learned forever about this idea of multi-generational legacies and projections. But it wasn't until I did work with Pia that I realized the transmission of these legacies is through trauma. In that moment, when you are triggered and you respond with your knee-jerk adaptive child response, you are the next iteration of the pattern. And in that moment, just like the liar guy I was talking about, in that moment, if you can take a breath, engage your prefrontal cortex, reach for your wise self, and do something heroic, something different, you release not just you, but you change the legacy for the generations. The work is in this moment right here. That's my experience of it.
Mm-hmm.
What about you?
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely work that is in this moment. And I think also maybe like raising our awareness that we are part of a bigger system. So for many people, not just seeing the individual aspects, but seeing that the individual aspect is bigger already raises like a bigger space of awareness. Oh, wow, I'm part of something that is beyond my individual self. I think that already opens a big space. It's also a bigger witnessing space, and that's definitely important. And I would also see in my work like I often say, we have this individual and ancestral nervous system, that our ancestors are not just separate in space-time, but they are living encoded in us. And so we have access to them in our sensing. And I'm sure in your work, when a grandfather comes in, or like a parent or some ancestor, like sensing that, like being aware of that or feeling that is for sure part of the healing process too. Like in the therapy work, when you do it with clients, I'm pretty sure. And I even have seen it when you do it. So like and I think that awareness building is really, that sensing is something crucial.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also cultural and social elements. Culture doesn't impact us. People impact us. There's no such thing as culture. It's your mother, your father, your uncle. I've written for 40 years critiquing the culture of patriarchy. I was dealing with a guy, he was a sexual offender, and we rolled back into his trauma, and he remembered being 4, and his father, he had a blankie, as kids do. And his father assembled his entire family, big family, on the porch and took his blanket and burned it. He was too old for that now, 4. And that moment was not just personal trauma. That was the imposition of patriarchy on this family, on this boy. That was a cultural act of violence, just like racism or homophobia or something else. So we wake up to our ancestors, and we also wake up to the larger context that we live in.
And maybe you want to expand a little bit. How do you see, like with all your like therapeutic understanding and all the wisdom that grew from this, like we are in a very specific time now, and we are living in a lot of collective dynamics, also collectively traumatic dynamics. A lot of old collective trauma comes up. So maybe you want to speak a little bit to the time we are in, and how we apply what the two of us talk about to the bigger context.
Well, I've written against patriarchy for 40 years. And in the book, I also take on what I call the toxic culture of individualism. And both combined feed us a poison delusion that we stand apart from nature, that's individualism, and that we stand above nature and control it, that's patriarchy. Whether the nature we're trying to control is our partners or our kids or our bodies or our thinking or the planet, we dominate. We're in control. That's an insane delusion. And what I say at the personal level is our relationships are our biosphere. And you've heard me say this a million times. We're not outside of it. We're in it. We breathe it. We depend upon it. I call that ecological humility. So I can indulge myself and have a temper tantrum and pollute my biosphere over here, but I'll breathe in that pollution and my partner's withdrawal or lack of sexuality over here. We're an ecosystem. We're connected. I call that ecological humility, as opposed to the grandiose delusion of being apart and dominating. And I literally believe, Thomas, that globally we are in a war, a cultural war. And there are progressive forces, like I imagine virtually everyone listening to this, who understand that relationships in the whole and cooperation and collaboration and humility is sane. And there's been a resurgence of power and control on steroids of traditional masculinity and strong men and autocrats and tyrants around the globe, and certainly in my country. And I honestly believe that which of these two parts of us as a species wins will determine the fate of democracy and the fate of our planet. We must trade in the delusion of dominance and control, which is often underneath that is a core of wound and fear.
Mm-hmm.
We must trade that in for the wisdom of collaboration and cooperation, or I fear for the fate of our species. I think the stakes are high.
Yeah, that's so powerful what you're saying, because that deeply underlines that underneath a lot of that also collective behavior is actually trauma. The need to control life is because we don't feel safe, we are hurt, there's a lot of fear in us stored, there's a lot of, and on top of that, there is a lot of exactly what you described. So that's why, like, to develop a systemic trauma awareness is so important. And I think you summarized beautifully. How do you see us? How can we respond? Like, what's a skillful response to the current resurgence? Like, how do you see us, or what are the things that every one of us can contribute to actually make a transition and strengthen the democratic powers basically in the world, so that they become more resilient, and that over time shows like more and more the intelligence of that system globally. But how do you look at that?
Well, to me, it's the same thing collectively as it is individually. One of the lessons I've learned later in my life, but one of the things I teach, is that there's no redeeming value in harshness. There's nothing that harshness does that loving firmness doesn't do better. And Gandhi is one of my great heroes. And, Gandhi taught us to stand up to power. I mean, put your body on the line and be willing to die if need be, civil disobedience. We must stand up to these forces. Just like in a relationship, if there's a power imbalance and there's one of the two partners is grandiose and abusive, they need to be stood up to. Bullies need to be stood up to, whether it's our government or your husband. And I believe in that. I don't believe in, throwing marshmallows at bullies. But you also need to remember that they're also human. The trick is standing up and being loving at the same time, whether it's in your family or whether it's reaching out to the other side of the aisle. If we see, I'll just say this, under patriarchy, you can either be connected or you can be powerful, but you can't be both at the same time. Because power is power over, it's dominance. When you move into power, you break connection. You see that sometimes when I work with couples, heterosexual couples, or even same-sex couples, with women who move from being disempowered to being like so empowered that you can't listen to them because they're so harsh. That's not a step up. The trick is to be what I'm teaching my clients, couples, is what I call loving power, soft power, where you stand up for yourself and you cherish the other person in the same breath. Look, you uber conservative, just took away Roe v. Wade. I believe in my heart that you believe you're saving little babies, or you're your work is righteous. Okay, let me try and understand where you are, and at the same time, let me fight like hell and hit the streets and push back on your restrictions of my freedom, but not by dehumanizing you or turning you into the enemy. I just think it's so powerful to stand up to what is pushing at you, and not become them while you're standing up to them.
Yeah, that's very powerful.
It's easy to feel disempowered. One of my two kids doesn't want to have kids, doesn't want to bring kids into this world because they don't want to subject somebody to what they think is coming. Man, as a father, that is really hard to sit with. I myself am very hopeful. There's the Jewish tradition of tzaddiks, of the few righteous who tip the scales, and I think we can all be tzaddiks in our lives and in our work. I have a great faith in the younger generation. Younger men are the least patriarchal that this planet's ever seen. They tend to be feminists. They tend to be in support of gay rights and gay marriage, more expressive. Mm-hmm. I think things are changing. I really, call me Pollyanna, but I really see this resurgence as a kind of death throes of an old system because it doesn't work. We are interconnected. There is climate change. Science is science. 2 + 2 = 4. It doesn't equal 5. So I have faith that we'll win over generations. We just have to survive as a species getting there. But one of the things I say, Thomas, is let's start with our own lives. You may not be able to bring peace to Ukraine, but you can damn well bring peace to your living room and your bedroom. Let's start there. I'll tell you a story. I like to tell stories. So I was sitting Zen with a Zen master here in Boston. I would come once a week and talk about my life, and then we meditate for 45 minutes together. It was fantastic. So I was just writing, I don't want to talk about it. And what was revealed to me was the shift from shame to grandiosity, from trauma to attack that we've been talking about. And I'm meeting with my teacher, and he says, and I said, oh my God, I've been so excited. I haven't been able to sleep for a week. I have gotten to the core of the dynamic of male violence in the world and how to stop it. I said, what would you say to that from the Zen perspective? And he looks at me and smiles and says, so how have you been treating Belinda? And I was so high on myself. I was a fucking asshole with Belinda. Nobody anybody could live with. But here I was curing the world's ills. So let's start with our own lives.
Well, that's very powerful. Very powerful. But coming back to the grandiosity, like when you look at the work on victimization and perpetration, how maybe you want to share with us your thoughts about how victimization leads to new perpetration, and how can we dismantle that or like stop that vicious cycle and bring something new? Like how does that work, and how do you see the different the impact of creating trauma on the perpetrator?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of my the things these days. I'm a little bit. It's like everybody's dealing with shame. Nobody's dealing with grandiosity. Everybody's a victim nobody's a perpetrator. It's like, well, wait a minute, where are all these victims coming from? They're punching themselves. I mean, somebody's victimizing them. I don't want to just deal with the effects of trauma. I want to deal with the cause of trauma. Trauma is about violence, emotional or physical violence. And so let's understand what makes somebody behave in violent ways and help them, not just deal with the results. So for years, I've written and worked about, I mean, I like everybody listening to just get real honest with themselves. That moment when you shift from the wound to the adaptation, from shame and feeling inferior to righteous indignation and feeling superior, from implosion to attack. We all do it. We all have it in us to do it, some more than others. And I think we healers and therapists must start dealing with grandiosity, not just shame. We have to help people come down from the one up, as well as up from the one down. And we must deal with grandiosity per se. It's not always a defense against shame. Often it is. But sometimes it's just learned behavior. It's modeled. When my father, I talk about two forms of abuse. And again, this is Pia Melody. There's disempowering abuse, which is the one everybody thinks of. But there's also false empowerment. You're the greatest thing since sliced. You get to do this. Therapists don't think about this, but social psychologists write a lot about modeling and how modeling gets passed on generation. When my father was beating me, on the receiving end of his abuse, I was disempowered. I was made to feel small and unloved, and that led to shame. But particularly same-sex parent, he was also modeling. He was teaching me, hey, this is what a grown man looks like when he gets angry. And as a young man, I was subject to rage, and I had to deal with that in myself and get help. So I think that we have to deal with the dynamics of violence in the world. We cannot just look at everybody as a victim. We have to be square about those parts of us that can escape our feelings of shame and helplessness and inadequacy by getting pumped up into the delusion of power and fury and attack. And we have to understand this impulse in us and deal with it. Dissolving the underlying trauma is critical, but oftentimes you won't get to the underlying trauma until you confront the adaptation of grandiosity and attack. Bullies have to be stopped. And so it's a combination of the two, I think, and at least in the therapy profession, confronting the offender is really not done very much. We protect the offender. We feel sorry for the offender. And I think we have to do both. We have to say, look, these are the things from your childhood, or these are the unresolved issues from the war. I know you're doing work with East-West integration in Europe. It's beautiful. These are the wounds that have set you up. You know, I mean, Putin grew up on the streets, rat-infested streets, starving. Mao was tortured as a child. I mean, these people were tortured as children. That's true, and also they're mass murderers. It's both. It's not either or. We have to hold both in our consciousness and help them heal from both sides of it. There's work now on what's called moral injury, the particular trauma of the perpetrator. And we're beginning to understand that committing violence traumatizes somebody. dehumanizes somebody. And we have to work with both sides of this, not just the victim side.
Right. Yeah, I'm very much with you on that. And also how like the inflicting trauma inflicts a shadow trauma on the perpetrator and kind of in a way kind of reduces the grace or the the support. I think the difference is also that in the victimization trauma, there's still grace open. So there's help. Grace is the attractor for help. But if grace is cut because of the transgression of the perpetration, then it needs a lot of internal motivation. And I think that's a very interesting conversation. And that also leads, like, that's pretty much as I think the work on the moral injury is very much looking at that direction. So I think that's a very interesting field to explore deeper. And also the perpetuating cycles of violence that we see over history, they're very much based on exactly what you said now. And I also think like that the trauma healing gives us, because sometimes the spiritual field doesn't have the power to confront bullies, and the spiritual practice to disembody it. So trauma healing, like a good integration practice, and the power of presence and like all the compassion and clarity, and so that the spiritual practice can give us, they need to be combined, that we can also stand up in the world. Otherwise, it's castrated in the world. It's floating on top of the world, but it doesn't have the power to impact. And then it's being discredited as kind of airy, and so, which in fact,
it is
as a bypassing, but it's not when it's cutting and finding the space.
That's exactly right. And when I confront offenders in my practice, which you've seen me do, I mean, I lean into grandiosity and I confront it head on. There are two things about it. One is I have I call it, "Oh, you poor perpetrator." This is how you were set up to be the jerk you are now. But you hold the person accountably and lovingly in the same breath. That goes beyond patriarchy, to be loving and powerful at the same time. And then the other piece of it is to separate the adaptation from the decent person underneath. Over and over again, when I'm sitting with often very difficult people, I would say, if I can role play for a moment, it's hard to even imagine, but I would say to role play Thomas, who's been, let's say, a philanderer and a liar and a cheat for 20 years. I would say at the end of a session, Thomas, you're a good guy. I say this over and over again. You're a good guy. I've been with men who are bad to the bone. They're called sociopaths, and man, they're cold. What's so sad is I'm talking to a decent man who's behaved indecently for the last 20 years. Will you let me rescue the real you from this nonsense? And people say yes. Nobody says no to that. So you separate who they really are in their decent core from this exoskeleton, the scaffolding that they've lived their whole lives within.
Mm-hmm.
You're not that horrible. You've done horrible things in your life, but you're not a horrible person. Holding both at the same time, I think, is what's so healing.
If there's anything that you want to summarize, or anything that we didn't talk about that seems important for you at the moment, then please let me know. There are some conclusions.
For the healers and therapists and coaches who are listening, you know this because you've heard me say it so many times. One of my very famous quotes is the German poet Goethe, who wrote once, "If you treat someone as they ought to be, they may become who they ought to be." So for us healers, have faith in the person you're working with and keep the bar high. for your expectations of their possibilities of transformation. I say for us healers, let us be the occasion that our clients rise to.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It speaks also very much to that only what we can embody, we can also hold the space for. Or that also speaks to like that our words and our inner experience are congruent. And that's what is the healing space about. So that was beautifully said, Terry. Terry, it's such a pleasure and deep time. I really enjoy every time when we dive into these realms together. It's always illuminating. It's fresh. It's I can feel your depth and also your own journey, how at the recent journey, how it's impacting you, and the kind of deepening that it created in you, and the wisdom that generates. So it's beautiful to be here with you.
We just love each other, and I think that I think that those of us who watch us together can feel our love for each other. It's a beautiful. I'm very appreciative.
That's very true, Terry. Very true. So thank you so much for your time. It's a deep enrichment for our summit, and I'm sure many people resonate, especially with the deep work on couples you do that many people also need. And so thank you for doing your work for such a long time and polishing your own diamonds continuously. That's very beautiful about you also, to see how you walk your talk and you polish your own diamond like all of us have to do. But that we are not looking at when will it be ready, but how can we keep polishing as life brings it. And I think you're a great example for that, Terry. So thank you. Thank you for being you, and all the blessings for you.
Thank you.
Visit collectivehealingconference.com to listen to featured talks from our most recent conference and sign up to be the first to know when the next conference is announced.
Thanks for listening to Point of Relation with Thomas Hübl. Stay connected and get updates about new episodes by visiting our website, pointofrelationpodcast.com, and by subscribing to the Thomas Hübl YouTube channel. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share about us with your community on social media. Thank you. We appreciate your support.